Well, some of God's best work is making beauty out of ashes. His most marvelous and miraculous works are almost always preceded by overwhelming challenges. Does this book title sound a little bit like a contradiction to you? Broken dreams, fulfilled promises. Carolyn Ros is back with more rich truths for our lives, and this time her husband Johan is going to help to tell this amazing story. Welcome from Amsterdam, an American woman with Norwegian roots and a Dutchman with Scottish roots. And let me just tell you where they've really come from immediately this past month. Belgium, Egypt, and Seattle. You guys have been flying, literally.
Literally.
And you are working with YWAM. Tell us what you're doing today.
We're senior advisors to the training program there. My husband is facility technical director of our 100-bed facility for the training in Amsterdam. So basically we're coaches. We're helping mentor and coach the next generation, not only in practical skills, but in spiritual disciplines.
That is precisely what you dreamed of doing when you met and married. This was your dream, to raise up the next generation, to disciple them, to serve God.
And we were involved at that time with a Bible school and a church. And if I look and see what we're doing now, in fact, it's the same. It looks different, so you have to adjust how you view what you're doing. But in fact, we really are continuing what in some ways we had a pause of learning deeper lessons before picking up the thread and going on with what we're doing now.
I went to Cape and Ray Bible School in England in 1981. You two met there a decade earlier.
Yes, yes. And after that, we went on and did the Wycliffe Bible Translators training. And we never did go out with them, but through the years, that training that we received both at Cape and Ray and also at Wycliffe have turned out to be very invaluable. Mm-hmm.
You went to Japan, but God called you to the Netherlands. This is very exciting, and I heard about this week. I was amazed. You're seeing it firsthand because you live there. God really made a promise to you that He was going to pour out His Spirit on Europe, and He wanted to prepare you to be a part of that. What's happening there today?
For the last 7 years, there has been a 24/7 prayer for the city by the churches in the city. So there's about 80 churches that have committed themselves to pray around the clock for the city. And the prayer, think of it in this way, that we're praying and asking God for the biggest blessing we can think of, and then praying it over each other. Other churches, other people in the city, other groups in the city. So not looking at, let's say, the brokenness and focusing on the brokenness, but asking God for His eyes for the city.
And you are actually believing that God will tear down the red light district?
Well, we're actually seeing it happen. That the city council is making new laws, and 150 of the brothels have already been closed.
150?
Mm-hmm. And more are to be closed. And there is the whole issue of human trafficking, money laundering, that the city council has decided to really change.
Wow.
And so we see it as an answer to prayer, as the city church prays and just asks God to just reveal His heart for the city.
Now, God told you He was going to do this years ago,
mm-hmm.
and He told you He wanted you prepared to be a part of it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You had no idea what that preparation would involve.
And I think in some ways maybe it's more His goodness that He doesn't reveal all of the things ahead of time, because otherwise you would look at your own resources as the starting point. But God has shown us that our own resources aren't the place to look. But
now, I was going to leave this till later, but I think it's important to recap. And if you think you recognize this couple, they were here last September. And we just knew we had to get them back here. And look what God is doing. I'm just thrilled. You faced tragedy early on as a new married couple. Johan, why don't you begin to tell us that story?
Yeah, so after we were 10 years married, and then unexpectedly, totally unexpectedly, I was 35 at that time, a tumor, my brains, and so I would say the top of my strength and my vision and serving the Lord as youth pastor, and then from one moment to the other, not able to after the operation, not able to do anything.
Big change. And
Yeah.
you really didn't have any warning. Carolyn, it was sitting at the breakfast table that
Yeah.
you saw something different in Johan's face.
Well, his eye was paralyzed, and he wasn't able to open it or close it, and that made us realize that something very significant was taking place. And luckily, the doctor ordered tests immediately, and so we didn't have to wait more than 2 weeks before the results came back that there was a tumor pressing on the optic nerve.
You were told to prepare a funeral.
We had to prepare the funeral, as initially there wasn't a surgeon prepared to operate. A little bit later there was a neurosurgeon who was willing to at least try the operation. And because our eldest son had been healed from a very serious blood disorder, we knew that God could intervene.
I mean, this is unfathomable. You had already, in your young marriage, been told to prepare a funeral for your firstborn.
Yes, and after about 6 weeks after his birth, we discovered that he had a hemophilia. It's a blood disorder. He only had 12% coagulating factor, and because just even from nursing he was bleeding from his palate, the doctors wouldn't allow us to take him home again. And so that was the first confrontation with impossibilities,
And God spoke.
he spoke.
In that, may I read exactly what you have in italics in your book? This is life. This is God's message to you. This is life. I want to teach you through this. Stay very close to me. Even though you walk through the valley of the shadow of death, you will fear no evil. That's
And
all you had.
That's all we had, but at the same time, it was the focus of, is God reliable? Can we take him at his word? Is he trustworthy? When push comes to shove, do we have a plan B? Or does God come through with the sustenance that we need to go on? Because sustenance doesn't necessarily mean healing, immediate healing, although I'm kind of an impatient sort of person. I prefer immediate answers. But
Don't we all?
but in that whole journey of not receiving immediate answers, the fact that God is giving all of us an invitation to come closer to him.
Now, I'm sure you expected God to do what he did when you prayed previously. And this is not how the story unfolded with Johan.
No, the operation did take place. Part of the brain was removed. Through that whole process, Johan had to relearn how to speak, and that's where the Wycliffe training came in handy. That it gave a framework for me to know how to teach him how to speak again.
Now let's just explain that Wycliffe are Bible translators.
Yes,
And although you didn't go out with Wycliffe, you had the tools
Mm-hmm.
to begin to train your husband in a language he didn't have. He'd lost it.
The brain is an amazing part of our body, and basically knowing skills of how to learn unknown languages, but also through prayer, combining the two together, I think, has resulted in Johan learning how to speak again.
Johan, what do you speak today? What languages, plural, do you
Well,
speak today?
English right now, but originally my Dutch and German.
German. Is there another one? I thought there was another one. Third language.
Yeah, English, Dutch, and German.
German. Oh, there they are, all three. And you didn't have any of that out of this crisis. No verbal.
With about 100-word vocabulary.
100
in
words in Dutch.
Very few, very
Totally.
few.
You know what I saw in this book that I missed last time? That your parents were prayer warriors, Carolyn. You have a model of prayer. In fact, you had a letter from your mom. She really spoke beyond the grave on this very theme.
Yeah, her last words, and because of the time difference and how slow the mail sometimes can be, that I received the letter actually after she had passed away. And her last words were to put my trust in God.
Trust in God. She had no idea how much you would have to trust in God. Now, we're looking at the positive outcome. We're looking at a couple living the dream that you had as a young couple.
Yeah.
But I don't know if we can possibly portray the journey and how difficult it was. you say, Carolyn, when Johan, you came out of surgery, you had less recognition than a newborn baby's eyes would reflect. There was just nothing there. And you didn't know who you were. There wasn't anything for you to grab onto of the past.
Yeah, it was a very shocking when I, after some time, recognized what had happened, what I have lost. At some moment that I remembered what I was and what I had become.